In Lahore, the provincial capital of Pakistan, at around 9:35 a.m. on Friday, August 26, 2011, Shahbaz Taseer was on his way to his office. He was just a block away when a white Toyota Corolla suddenly cut him off, bringing his car to an abrupt stop. Before he could react, 5 or 6 armed men emerged from the vehicle, waving their weapons, 2 carrying pistols and 1 brandishing an automatic Kalashnikov. Initially, Shahbaz assumed it was a carjacking. Hoping to avoid further trouble, he quickly took out his wallet, mobile phone, and watch, handing them over to the man standing closest to his window. Also, as Shahbaz described it, "I had the presence of mind to drop the car keys into the door panel. If this was a carjacking, at least I could make it more difficult for them. But this was no ordinary robbery. One of the kidnappers dragged him out of the car, while another pulled a hood over his head. They forcefully dragged him toward their vehicle as he yelled and struggled." Also, as Shahbaz described it, it was chaotic, a bunch of grown men yelling and screaming in the middle of the street like something out of an old slapstick comedy. The kidnappers threw him onto the floor of their car and injected him with ketamine, knocking him unconscious. 4 of them got inside, while a 5th was instructed to follow them in Shahbaz's Mercedes. However, in his panic, the kidnapper struggled to start the car. There were no typical keys, only a keyless ignition system. Frustrated, he abandoned the Mercedes and rushed to join the others in their getaway vehicle. They sped away at approximately 9:45 a.m. Meanwhile, another member of the gang who happened to be a telecom engineer, the one carrying the Kalashnikov, grew greedy and wanted to take the Mercedes. He too struggled with the ignition. In desperation, he called their lookout, Usman Basra, also an engineer stationed at a nearby corner. Usman, riding a motorbike, hurried to the scene, but upon arrival, the two got into a heated argument. Usman urged him to get rid of the Kalashnikov, fearing it would attract attention. The kidnapper initially resisted, but eventually agreed, tossing the weapon at Hussein Chok before they sped away toward their safe house in Valencia town. But luck intervened. Unbeknownst to them, Usman had stuffed his mobile phone inside his helmet before the escape. As they hit a pothole at high speed, the phone fell out, landing on the roadside. In the chaos, neither of them noticed the critical mistake, one that would later play a major role in the investigation. Office workers witnessed some of the abduction and immediately alerted the authorities. By 10:05 a.m., operatives from the Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI, had sealed off the crime scene and launched an investigation. Shahbaz Taseer is the son of former provincial governor of Pakistan, Salman Taseer. He was killed by a religious fanatic named Mumtaz Qadri. His assassination actually brought the Taseer family into further spotlight. Colonel Kiani was leading the investigation. There were no reliable witnesses, no solid leads, only a discarded Kalashnikov left abandoned on the street. Colonel Kiani was already deeply involved in another high-profile case, the abduction of Warren Weinstein, an American aid worker. In that investigation, the team had managed to identify a few potential suspects. One of them was an engineering student who revealed that he had rented out a vacant house for a friend named Usman Basra. It was the only peripheral lead linking Usman Basra to the Weinstein case. Still, there was no concrete evidence connecting him directly to either abduction. Colonel Kiani again dispatched a team to Basra's home. Agents persuaded Usman's father to call his son and urge him to return home. But before the call could be made, Usman had already been warned by his own brother. He was concerned for his family's safety, so he decided to return home voluntarily because interrogation methods in Pakistan aren't human rights friendly. He was convinced that the authorities lacked any proof of his involvement. ISI agents swiftly took Usman Basra into custody. However, hours of questioning led nowhere. There was no evidence tying him to either of the kidnappings. He was on the verge of being released. But his luck ran out when a search team discovered a mobile phone near the abduction site. Investigators traced the phone back to an unlikely source, a young woman. Upon questioning, the woman revealed that the phone was for a student of her father's. The student had claimed he was facing a family problem and needed help. She identified him as Usman Basra. For Colonel, it was an unexpected break. Without wasting time, Usman was brought back in for another round of questioning. Colonel asked the direct question, "Are you involved in Shahbaz's kidnapping?" He confessed with a smile on his face and said, "You are late." He also revealed the location of the safe house. Officers arrived on Sunday morning, but the scene was already abandoned. An old mattress, broken sunglasses, discarded license plates, a chair with rope fragments, and a syringe filled with ketamine were the only leftovers. The investigation later revealed that the kidnappers had fled around 4 a.m., taking Shahbaz Tazir with them. To avoid detection, they disguised him in a black burqa, traditionally worn by Muslim women, and placed him in the backseat of a car. It was Ramadan, so traveling early in the morning didn't cause any suspicion. At a checkpoint, the officer briefly inspected the vehicle, respecting family privacy, a deeply rooted value in Pakistani society. He didn't question the passengers and unknowingly allowed the kidnappers to pass without interference. By 5 p.m. that same day, Shahbaz had been transported over 500 kilometers to Mir Ali, a remote town in North Waziristan. He was now deep inside militant-controlled territory, hidden, isolated, and far from the possibility of any immediate rescue. 3 culprits that ISI captured were not just militants. These 3 individuals had deep personal ties to Muhammad Ali, the leader of Shahbaz's captors. Among them was Usman Basra, an engineer who was engaged to Ali's sister-in-law. These emotional bonds ensured Shahbaz's life, making them vital assets in maintaining Shahbaz's captivity and ultimately contributing to the unraveling of the group's operations. After the one-to-one conversation with the kidnappers, Shahbaz realized they weren't Al-Qaeda, in fact, Uzbek militants. Shahbaz's captors believed his high-profile identity could yield an extraordinary ransom, so they demanded $45 million and the release of key terrorists, including a religious fanatic, Mumtaz Qadri, the man who assassinated Shahbaz's father. But these demands couldn't be accepted, so Ali threatened to kill Shahbaz during negotiations. Shahbaz's mother responded like an iron lady, "It will be body for body and blood for blood." Ali understood what she meant. He didn't want Usman and others to die. ISI contacted the Afghan Taliban and asked them to play their part. The Taliban started pressuring the Uzbeks to stop this nonsense. Ali couldn't handle so much pressure and became paranoid, starting to shift safe houses to avoid detection by Pakistani intelligence and potential drone strikes from the United States. In June 2012, Shahbaz was held captive in a house in the village of Hasuk Hel, a small settlement near Mir Ali in North Waziristan. His house was next to the home of Abu Yahya al-Libi, one of al-Qaeda's top commanders. A U.S. drone strike targeted Abu Yahya al-Libi. The first attack struck Shahbaz's house. Miraculously, Shahbaz survived the first strike, and the second strike hit Yahya's house and killed him. Everyone in Pakistan and American media thought Shahbaz was dead too, as no one could survive 2 drone strikes. The negotiations for his release were suddenly thrown into uncertainty as his captors struggled with the mounting pressure and the realization that their hideout was no longer safe. By mid-2014, the Pakistani military launched Operation Zarb-e-Azb, a full-scale offensive to eliminate militant strongholds in North Waziristan. Ali was forced to relocate into the Shawal Valley, a rugged mountainous region bordering Afghanistan. But this valley was the final objective of Operation Zarb-e-Azb. Ali knew about it, so he relocated to a valley in the Zabul province of Afghanistan on January 1, 2015. In 2015, tensions between Uzbeks and the Taliban escalated. The death of Taliban leader Mullah Omar and the rise of ISIS created deep fractures among militant groups. Ali was convinced that the Taliban was weakening, and so he pledged allegiance to ISIS, a fatal miscalculation. Ali performed some militant activities in Afghanistan on ISIS orders. This enraged the Afghan Taliban. In November 2015, the Taliban launched a coordinated attack on 3 Uzbek camps in Zabul. Shahbaz, trapped in the crossfire, witnessed the battle unfold as the Taliban encircled the valley. The fighting raged for 3 days. Outgunned and outnumbered, the Uzbeks suffered heavy losses. Ali attempted to negotiate, but the talks collapsed when an Uzbek fighter killed a Taliban negotiator. The retaliation was swift. The Taliban executed every Uzbek fighter they found. In the chaos, Shahbaz saw his chance. Disguised in a hijab, he slipped out of a shelter and ran. Moments later, Ali was gunned down by the Taliban. Shahbaz's freedom was short-lived. He was recaptured by the Taliban, who considered him an Uzbek ally, and held in an overcrowded prison in Uruzgan province. No one knew his true identity, but without external help, he knew he would never leave alive. Then, a chance appeared. He made acquaintance with a fellow prisoner named Malang, a respected Taliban commander with influence outside the prison. Shahbaz saw an opportunity and told him that the Afghan Taliban were negotiating with the Uzbeks on his behalf. Malang was skeptical. Without proof, he refused to believe Shahbaz's claims. Malang asked for the name of the negotiator. Shahbaz couldn't remember the name, because in Pakistani culture, respected figures are named after certain affiliations. For example, someone who has performed Hajj, the pilgrimage to the Kaaba is called Haji. Most people usually don't know their full name. Similarly, someone who has memorized the entire Quran is called Hafiz. Shahbaz used to call the Taliban negotiator Haji Sahib, but he couldn't remember the full name. It took him 3 months to recall it. Haji Khalil-ur-Rahman Haqqani. Malang's expression changed when he heard it. The name was enough. On February 29, 2016, Malang arranged for Shahbaz's release. Without explanation, he handed him 15,000 Pakistani rupees and pointed toward the helmet. For the first time in nearly 5 years, Shahbaz was technically free, but faced another challenge: survival in a war-torn land where every step carried the risk of recapture or death. His only instruction from Malang was to walk down the mountain to a rendezvous point. After hours of walking, Shahbaz reached a small settlement on March 1, 2016, where a group of Taliban fighters awaited him, arranged by Malang. They were instructed to transport him across Afghanistan. With no questions asked, he paid 5,000 rupees from the money Malang had given him. In a convoy of 5 motorcycles, Shahbaz began a journey on March 2nd across unforgiving deserts and mountains. But after days of relentless travel, on March 7th, Shahbaz heard a sound: tires moving over smooth pavement. For the first time in over a year, he was back on Pakistani soil. The border had been crossed. Near the city of Quetta, Shahbaz couldn't pass through the checkposts unnoticed. The Taliban fighters who had ferried him across Afghanistan left him behind, unwilling to risk their own freedom. Even though he was in Pakistan, he was still hundreds of kilometers from home, in the same province where his nightmare had begun. A rickshaw carried him toward Kuchlak, a small town outside Quetta. In Kuchlak, Shahbaz contacted his family using a stranger's mobile phone. His mother hesitated to answer the unknown number, but after 4 missed calls, she finally picked up. Shahbaz kept the conversation short, speaking only in Urdu to avoid attracting attention. He gave his location and pleaded for help. His mother, thousands of kilometers away in Lahore, knew exactly who to call. General Aftab, a senior army officer who had once worked on Shahbaz's case, had been reassigned to Quetta, coincidentally the very city where Shahbaz now waited for help. An elite commando team was dispatched. Within 50 minutes, they arrived at the Salim Hotel. Shahbaz identified himself to the commander. The general looked at him and said, "What wood are you made of?" Shahbaz replied, "Sir, I'm not made of a wood that burns easily." The general replied, "Welcome home, son.